for joining us today. I am very, very excited to have these two gentlemen here with me to talk all about budgeting, everybody's favorite or least favorite word, depending on where you're coming at it from. My name is Joe Giovannoli. For those that have not been to a webinar previously or have not met me, I'm the founder and managing partner of Nine Sale. We are a digital marketing company specialized in working with law firms to help them to grow digitally, SEO, paid search, content creation, and public relations. I have two friends here, which I'm really excited, first and foremost, to be able to call them my friends, and second of all, to have them here to have this chat. So, Roy, would you like to take a minute to introduce yourself?
Sure. Roy Sexton, Director of Marketing at Clark Hill, immediate past president of the International Board of the Legal Marketing Association, and friend of Joe, most important of all. And it's so funny. I was a theater and English major. I have a master's in theater, and I keep getting pulled into. I was treasurer at the Midwest region, treasurer at the International. I keep getting pulled into these finance conversations. I should have majored in something else, I think.
Well, you have a wide range of expertise, so everybody wants to
Or I
pull.
just make things up.
There you go. That too. Whatever, right? Fake it till you make it. Roy, thanks for joining us. And
Sure.
Jack, introduce yourself.
Yeah, Jack Prince, Simple Numbers, CRI. A lot of consulting, relationship, CFO type services. Again, Joe, good friend, got to meet for the first time in numerous years of knowing him this year, which was a great experience. And Roy, maybe it's because you're the person we're looking for at Simple Numbers. You might not love the financials, but you can talk about it
Oh, I see what you
because
did
that's
there.
what we struggle with. It's the communication style, right? And that's what everyone is, hey, let's talk about budgets, but nobody wants to have that conversation because the person doing it is just not great to listen to.
I'd say you're doing quite well. That was nicely done. Good elevator pitch.
Uh,
Bam. Well
yeah,
done.
that's it.
Hey, if you're
Exactly.
not recruiting 24/7 these days, what are we doing?
Yep.
Jack, thank you. And full disclosure with everybody, Nine Sale has been working with CRI and Simple Numbers for the last almost 5 years now. They work with full suite of industries, including legal. So Jack's insights here are going to be quite awesome, coming at it from another perspective. We've been running this same webinar, different questions, different people for the last 3 years, and this is the first time that we've brought an outside of industry partner to come in and talk specifically about the finances. So really excited to have both of you here. Thank you so much. We're going to launch a poll really quickly. And this is an anonymous poll. We just want to kind of get a baseline here. The data that's going to be shared is all going to just be percentages of who answered how, but not who it is. So I'm going to launch this poll. If you could take a moment just to answer the 3 questions, that would be really helpful. Again, it's totally anonymous, so this is not going to be public information. But it would be really great to get a good baseline here. First question, what percentage of revenue is your firm allocating to marketing each year? Second question is, how much of your budget is allocated to digital? And third is, do you track ROI on ad spend? So let's just take 30 seconds here and answer the question the best that you can. And while we do this, Roy, I know we're going to be kind of leading into this, but you've been with Clark Hill for some time. What has your experience been around them allocating budget towards marketing?
Yeah, I've been here 6 years. I've been in legal since 2012. And I would say, and I say this with love, I want to compare more broadly what I saw in healthcare versus what I saw in legal, and then I can turn to my immediate experience. But it's really night and day in terms of the way legal budgets versus any other industry. And I highly encourage people who can get an opportunity to see how other industries do this. It's important because I think we have to find ways with grace to challenge the process. Going back to the way law firms are structured, it's sometimes checkbook accounting on steroids. It's how much did we bring in, how much did we spend in a year, and then what does the partnership divvy up at the end? And that tends to drive a lot of the way people consider investing in their own organization. So I was in healthcare, that's not how we thought about it at all. The infrastructure was presumed, it was needed, and there was kind of a thoughtful approach to what is our 5-10 year strategy to develop any of the areas of the organization that supported the healthcare system. So when we were doing our budgeting process, we were looking at long-term capital investment, short-term immediate operational investment, proposing our budget, looking at how not just what our performance had been that year, but what our anticipated performance was, and making sure, for example, in marketing and advertising, we were building in the investment that would be needed for growth. It often feels to me in legal, it's the opposite. How did we do this year? Oh, okay, well, we don't want to spend much more because we're afraid. We're afraid. We're afraid. We're afraid of a recession. We're afraid of this, as opposed to saying we need to make the investment long term that's going to facilitate the growth. Now, I'm lucky at Clark Hill. We've got a lot of folks that came from Deloitte and other places. We have more kind of business-like approach to it. We break it down by practice area, by industry. We apportion a lot of what would typically be a marketing spend into those areas, so the managers of those areas can have kind of line of sight on what's working, what's not with our oversight. We focus more on the marketing infrastructure when we're budgeting, but I would say we still are prone to some of that thinking, which is, we're not going to invest in a CRM this year, next year, because we're worried about a recession, versus saying we need to invest in the infrastructure now so we can weather through the recession, so we can count noses, so we can see what the pipeline looks like. So again, not being critical of my current organization, but I think that's just a challenge legal has generally. And I have one voice, having worked in 3 different firms of different sizes and different orientations, so other people might have different perspectives.
Yeah, for sure. And we were talking about this a little bit when we were prepping, but the 7 to 10% of revenue number for kind of we'll call normal industry is about right. 7 to 10+%, right? And whereas with legal, it really just depends on where you are in terms of size. But notwithstanding PI firms, right? The 7 to 10% is for the smaller firms are willing to spend that. And then as you grow, it's 3 to 5%, 1 to 3%, right? And that's not necessarily right. Right. And to some of the things that you said, right, there's a hesitancy to invest because of the fear factor. I'm actually going to share the results here, just so everybody can see kind of the results on percentages people are spending. I expected to see that 1 to 2% number being most of 53%, some 21% less than 1%, and 21% at 3 to 5%. How much of your budget is allocated each year to digital each year? Less than 25%, 25 to 50%. We have a firm doing greater than 75%. That's awesome. And then do you track ROI? This also didn't surprise me. We're going to talk a little bit about this at the end, but if you're not tracking ROI, how do you know where your dollars are working? So that's something that's really big. We're going to share this in the recap, so this is not going to go away permanently, but for those of you that are attending that did answer this, we really appreciate it. And for those of you that did not, we totally understand.
May I add one thing that it just occurred to me as you were speaking, and this was from our prep as well. Other industries of which I've been a part, salaries of your people and your marketing budget are separate entities. There's always an eye on both and the investment the organization's making in that. We have it separate here at Clark Hill as well, but other firms I've been at, it may be separate, but they tend to think about the investment in salaries as their marketing budget. The last firm I was at, I was a solo marketer. I'm never going to do that again. You can find who they are on my LinkedIn. But they were great people. But when I went there, I would say, I need the tools. Well, isn't your salary our marketing budget? No, you hired me.
Yeah.
Now I need the tools. And I remember pointedly saying, I can't do pitches, proposals, website, go to every event, do 8,000 things, only 50 attorneys. Now I probably could after the 6 years at Clark Hill where we have 775 attorneys. But I said, can I have an assistant? Well, and they sent the controller in to talk to me, who said, well, if you have an assistant, what will you do all day?
Huh.
But I think some of our smaller and mid-sized firms, and even the larger firms, the marketers are swimming against that stream where there is a mindset that the budget they have for marketing is what they're paying the people for. And then they should magically weave all of this out of broad cloth. And it's just not reasonable. So
yeah,
there's my soapbox.
And I'm biting my tongue a lot during you guys' conversation right now, where we can talk accounting on a lot of this, and I know that's not the webinar, but yeah, I mean, it is an interesting piece where you're 100% spot on, where again, those small to medium, as they grow and they have this passion and drive to become larger businesses, they get caught in a little bit of a midriff where they say, well, we've outsourced a lot of marketing, and now we have to invest in this internal marketing person. And so it's only fair that that goes into the same. Well, that's truly not how it should be looked at. The truth of the matter is somebody was wearing 15 to 30 hats, and marketing was one of them. It probably wasn't being done 100%, and they were the go-to person for the outsourced marketing team. Well, that person that you hire, Roy, like you were in that experience you just shared, they're outside of the marketing. They still get the same budget to go spend on marketing each year. They're just the sole point now of the internal versus external marketing to revenue generation, realistically, on that standpoint. And so I do think it's a fascinating piece of, a lot of it is where businesses are, where their growth scales looking at, what they've done in the past. Again, even if you take out the scale piece, past experiences for a lot of leadership team members going through these conversations play into the fact. And that's where a lot of what we do is come in and talk about it. Because again, coming from the financial side, I think it's interesting that you say 7 to 10% for the industry we're talking about. Look, for the grand scheme of every business, at Simple Numbers, we're not agnostic to a specific industry. We really take our model and apply it to every business. If it's a business, 5 to 10% is what every business should be spending on marketing realistically each year.
Yep.
Can we clip that and push it
Yes,
out?
we will. We got it. We will clip it.
Thank you.
We will clip it.
But it really gets into it is, we can spend all this time in industry. We can spend all this time doing all this, but sometimes the most beneficial data you can get is being challenged from other industries. And this is why I drive all people in all frames of world to get out of their industry and join some group outside of it, because it's just beneficial for all future growth for you as an individual, as a professional, and as a leader moving forward.
Yeah.
It is interesting to me. Lawyers worry about what their clients think about them, and are they keeping pace with the way they think about and do their work, except when it comes to this.
Yeah. Well, so yeah, I was just going to chime in and say a couple of things. One, they're so focused on what their competitors are doing, right? That they're losing sight of the reason why their clients hire them, right? And getting that message out in front of them rather than trying to keep up with the Jones and Jones and Jones firm. See what I did there? But you really want to make sure that, as a firm, that your leadership team understands that we have to get our attributes out in front of people, the things that the reason why our clients come to us and hire us. And that takes money and dollars, right? And as we scale, we can't just stay where we are, because, we have more mouths to feed, more people to cover. And if we're not spending enough money to do that, and we're going to just get the same return on those same dollars over and over again, you're not really growing, right? Or maybe you're growing in a predictable way, but you're missing out and you're leaving money on the table, right? That's the first thing there that I think is really important. And I do think that the other side of this is that, as we all know, leadership always looks at this as an expense, right? They're not looking at our cost center. They're not looking at marketing. Most firms are not looking at marketing as an investment. And whereas if the ROI piece that we said we were going to talk about in a little while, if you're have a true track of ROI, which is a team sport, by the way, but if you have a true track of ROI, the leadership team will want to put more money in because their payouts are going to be bigger, right? They may have to spend a little bit more, but the reality is they should be getting 5, 10, 15x back on every dollar that they spend, and they should be happier than a clam on that. So I'll get off the soapbox, but I do think that those are some of the misconceptions that every year we talk about this. And every year there's no movement made, right? And at some point, somebody has to take a stand.
Well, and I'm a fan of culture change and organizational structure to drive outcomes.
Yeah.
One of the challenges I think we have faced, and I saw it at that firm where I was, law firms want to think about marketing as Kinko's, as Kelly Services. You do the things we need you to do, as opposed to your strategist to think about how we need to position ourselves and how you use the resources accordingly. So we see a lot of firms. My very first firm, I told you this in the prep, and I loved working there. It was a mortgage foreclosure firm, and there's a special place in hell for me that I did it as long as I did, I'm sure. But I remember sitting down with the managing partner and saying, can I see the budget? Can I see our P&L? Oh, what do you need to see that for? You don't worry, you'll have enough to get your stuff done. Well, how do I know if I'm even moving the needle on anything? So there's this compartmentalization of information. The partnership gets to see things, your staff, you don't. Well, if you don't let me have some line of sight on outcomes, I'm flying blind and I'm doing work that may or may not be helpful, but even good marketers will fall into the trap then of, well, if I can't see what I'm moving, I'm just going to keep people happy. And I'm going to do random acts of marketing that please an internal audience to save my skin versus actually thinking about what are we doing to differentiate this organization. So again, you may as well light your money on fire in the street, leaders. If you're hiring marketing professionals, if you're giving them resources and you're not letting them see the financial information, how can they know if they're having an impact?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. So, and I think it was last year, I believe it was last year, we had Andy Laver on at Porzio, and he, we talked about the power of being able to say no, right? And it's so amazing when the firm gives the marketing department the right to say, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Attorney, I understand that you want to go sponsor this golf outing, but it has not yielded anything in the last 3 years. And we, doing this because it's going to appease this person may not necessarily be the right use of these funds. Right. And so giving marketers the ability to say no. I know we're speaking to a group of marketers here on this webinar. So, our lips to your managing partner's ears.
Well,
but
and this gets to your ROI question. And
yeah,
I would challenge the marketers, don't wait for someone to give you the permission to say no. Collect the information you can to earn the right to say no. And you may or may not have all the data you want to, because we as marketers are like, well, if I can't measure ROI on everything, then I can't do, well, you might not be able to. But if you can year over year, and some of those things, I'll tell my folks, don't screw up the easy stuff because you never get to the hard stuff. Execute the bad idea flawlessly. I don't love this advice, but sometimes you have to do that and collect the data, collect the attendance, do it anecdotally. Look at, if you can't look at every client and all the revenue, pull out some specific ones that you know are tied to some of these efforts,
yeah,
and then say, I just did this the other week with a holiday party that somebody really loves to have. And I said, you invited 500 people, 70 showed up, 15 were us. Do you think that's a good use of those resources? Oh, maybe we need to downsize this a little bit. So you earn the right, because at the end of the day, it's still impacting their pocketbook. So the ROI can be expressed beautifully, wonderfully in advance of budget. And you sit down and say, here's everything we did last year. But sometimes it's got to be street fighting. It's in the moment, but it's going to be year over year. And you might have to do that sponsorship a couple years in a row and say, why did we do this? Oh, you told me last year it was going to do this. Did that happen? Oh, it didn't. Okay,
Yeah.
maybe we don't. And they will often answer their own question, or maybe we shouldn't do this anymore. But you have to have some patience to earn the no versus just saying we're not doing this.
yeah. Jack.
Joe, you cut me off here anytime because my soapbox just became bigger and bigger as Roy continued to keep talking. So, um, look, I agree with everything you guys are saying. And again, it all comes back to leadership. You've got to hold your leadership team accountable, just like leadership's going to hold you accountable to doing what you do. If you're not getting the data that you need to see on the P&L, build your own data, as Roy's saying. Build out what the attendance is, do all of this, and go and show return from what you've calculated, and then say, well, prove me wrong in revenue, right? Because there is a lot of misconception that, well, the actual return on investment and everything like that is not something that marketers are supposed to be doing. It's actually supposed to be the accountant, the CFO, the number side of the house that's supposed to do it. But I promise you, if a lot of people did the self-diagnosis, the reason that accounting doesn't do it is because the accounting's not where it needs to be. And the reason that marketing can't do it is because they're told they can't do it. Well, most of the time it's because the accounting's not done the right way by leadership. But it's also the other piece. Everybody's waiting for somebody else to take the buck, the blame, the problem. Nobody's willing to take the ram by the horns and say, hey, look, you're about to hurt me. So guess what? I'm just going to stop you. I'm going to grab you. I'm going to hold you. I'm going to give you a talking to. And hopefully you understand the human language, because you're going to turn around and walk away there on that standpoint.
Yeah.
But that's what we're looking at. And it gets into the return standpoint. Guess what? It doesn't have to be, as Roy's saying, the specific spend to the specific revenue to the specific XYZ. What can be done is, hey, I've spent X, unless it's produced Y for the overall business, maybe we got to do something different.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so again, it's this piece of, you don't have to get specifics. You don't have to get everything, but data is your best friend. You guys don't know me. I'm a data junkie. You give me a bunch of data, I will make use of it. I'll ignore half of it though. But guess what? 6 months down the road, I'll take that half that I ignored back then and I'll start using it. But if you don't have data and you now want to start doing something, it takes 6 to 12 months to be able to have that data discussion. And I don't want anyone to be there.
Yeah.
And this is you had a couple rabble rousers here, Joe. I don't know how you're gonna rein us back in, because I'm gonna say some things that maybe get me fired. I don't know. What else is new? We work for people who love to take the anecdote and create this broad brush crisis as a result of it. I can think of one attorney that'll go, "This is terribly written. I need to fix this." And he sends it back and he's added a comma. "Oh, somebody didn't respond to this. That must mean none of the invitations got where they were going." No, they could be lying to you because they don't want to come, but they're acting like I went to spam. So if we know that's their mindset, why can't we borrow some of that as well? I don't want to be disingenuous, misleading, but if you can't measure the ROI on every single thing you're doing, focus on the aspects where you can demonstrate that value, because they're going to respond to that, because that's how their brains think. They take one little thing and they go, "Oh my God, here's the big conclusion." We can be more nuanced than that. But by the same token, we can in reverse say, "You're right. That's how your brain works. Let me apply some of that. This is the outlier I'm seeing from this situation. We're not getting the return from it." Like, I loved Jack's point. Prove me wrong with revenue.
Yeah. So I want to, before we move on from this topic, I'm hoping the one coachable moment, no matter what level of marketing you are sitting here on this
Thank
webinar.
God Joe's trying to translate this into something people will use.
The one thing that I think everybody needs to kind of take away from this is that you have to own your journey, right?
Yes.
And the way that I like to go about this when I'm talking to a managing partner about return on investment, and if the firm doesn't have the infrastructure, is positioning it in a way that said, "Hey, listen, you're going to allocate this many hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to marketing, right? And we're supposed to do X, Y, and Z and spend it with, where the attorneys want, and spending it on the website. And, if we can't tell you for certain, or we don't have the power for certain to tell you how many dollars you've gotten back on those dollars spent, what is the sense in doing this?" Right. And if you were to hand your financial advisor, and this is what the tack I take, is that if you were to hand your financial advisor $1 million, you want your financial advisor to come back to you and tell you how much return on investment you got on that money. And he or she could take it and actually break it down for them based off of what stocks or mutual funds or whatever paid out. So sometimes it's bringing it to that level for them to understand it. And we've seen plenty of firms that we work with that it clicked in the managing partner's head, and then all of a sudden, all of the barriers opened up. CFO and accounting started working with marketing. Marketing was providing a list of leads and calls that came through that they could pair up with the financial data. Is it more work? Absolutely. But when you, the marketer, can prove how many dollars are coming out of each channel, it's freeing for you to say, "Hey, paid search generated, 3/4 of the revenue that came from marketing. We're going to take away from this and we're going to put it into there to see if we can continue to replicate that until we see diminishing returns."
That's
right.
how you regain the control. There is a question in the chat that relates to this. I don't want to presuppose your
please go ahead.
But the firm that I am with has a model where each attorney has an individual budget, which is supposed to include marketing. There is really no marketing budget. And I'm presupposing that person's challenge is, how do I articulate ROI when it's stuck in all these different places? We had I'm offering this because we had a version of this at Clark Hill, and I found it very instructive, and I think we netted out to a really good place. When I got there, my predecessor had taken all the sponsorship dollars that were apportioned that way and pulled them into marketing, but just started using that money the way they wanted to versus articulating to the individuals, "You don't have your sponsorship dollars anymore." So those people came screaming at me when I came in, "What happened to my Red Cross this and such and everything?" I'm like, I don't know. So we migrated back to those monies going back to the individual budgets. I don't necessarily think that sponsorship stuff, quite frankly, there's not a lot of value you get out of sponsorships. It has to be individually driven, and it's a bit of a tithing that they're giving to somebody that they want to create impressions around. But we knew they still needed logos, they still needed ads, and they still wanted this, our C-suite still wanted to track what the spend was. So we created a very simple sponsorship form in Wufoo, and we said, and we worked with finance, and we said, "Please do not cut a check unless you see this form completed." And people screamed for about 6 months. But then they realized it streamlined everything for them. They had one form to fill out. It went to finance. It went to us. The logo went where it went. The ad went where it went. But what we got out of it was we were able to put in Power BI then, here's all the sponsorship spend across the organization. We're not the police of it. We're not saying yes or no. That's on them and their individual management to determine if it's valuable. But then we can look line of sight and go, we've been doing this a few years in a row. And in partnership, this is what Jack is pointing to. Don't put it all on your shoulders. There might be another person you can partner with and say, now we can have the conversation with this person. We've sponsored this for 3 years. They said it was going to do this. It hasn't. But the fact that you've got that individually budgeted might work in your favor. But what is the pain point for them? Create the centralization. So all that flows into one place. You at least get line of sight on it, and you're not dealing with the headache of saying yes or no to these things.
Yeah. Well, and I'm sure we have people here that are thinking to themselves, like, is this a fight I really want to take on? Is this a hill I want to die on? Right.
Pick your battles.
Yeah. Pick your battles. Right. And I think that's fair. But I would say if there's any battle worth fighting, it's the battle to get clarity around what is actually coming in based off of the work that you're doing.
Sure.
What is that actually gaining the firm? Because that conversation, even if you're not getting the results out of your SEO that you thought you were, and you can prove that, that's great, because you can say to the firm, hey, this initiative did not work out the way that we wanted to, nor do we think it's going to in the future. We can cut this spending and either move it over here or redisperse it, or, you know what, we take it off the table because, we just don't want to spend on it. Right. And yeah,
here's my caveat. And my warning to people is it's very easy, though, to get preoccupied on the Red Cross sponsorship and the football tickets and what the ROI on that is. You're going to lose that battle all day long. Who cares? But where you can carve out the ROI on the stuff you control, because we know the attorneys are afraid of technology. I'm sorry, they are.
Mm-hmm.
We know that they are like, oh, please handle the social media. Please handle the SEO. Please handle the website. So you get your budget where you manage those costs. You manage the infrastructure that helps the attorneys on scale. And you focus the ROI conversation on that. And it's going to leave the answer of, well, what about all this other money that's being spent over there? And you go, yeah, we want to keep people happy. They're spending all this money over here. What I have line of sight on and control, we're seeing a return on. So what do we do about that? Mm-hmm. Because too often I see people go in and they're playing whack-a-mole with sponsorships and parties and football tickets and stuff. And you're never going to get your head above water. But if you can carve out the stuff you know and can influence, that's why I focus on social media, PR, thought leadership, digital strategy, because that's scary enough to the firm that I don't have 1,000 cooks in that kitchen.
Yeah, that's well said. Thank you. Jack, you work primarily with firm leadership when you are working with them as a client. So I'm curious, when you are having a marketing or business development conversation with a managing partner, or maybe it's a CFO, when you have to kind of get them to see the light, so to speak, on how and where their marketing budget gets spent and things like that, what are some of the things that you can say to them that will help them to see that light?
I'm going to see your question, but kind of avoid it just for a second, because sure. I think, and most people will see this, even if they don't see data, is going into a new year, it's going to be, hey, our plan is to hire X amount of folks, X amount of attorneys to go, because that's what's going to go push revenue. We have another, but we can bill more time out for it. And a lot of the conversations we're having with folks in your industry right now are truly actually changing things around and saying, hey, we've invested $300,000 of annual compensation, for example, over the last 12 months, and it's not changed revenue at all. What did we go about this wrong? Did we invest in people before we invested in marketing to have a pipeline and a lead process generation for people to walk in and have space on? And so a lot of what we do, Joe, you're right, is with executives, it's with owners, it's with CFOs. And a lot of what we are technically known at here at Simple Numbers is labor efficiency ratios. And that's what we hold most folks accountable to is, hey, Just because you hire a butt in a seat does not mean that you've got now more billable time that's going to increase revenue. And again, this is where we actually talked about it on our pre-meetings, and I don't know if it's been brought up. If it has, it just passed by my ears. Marketing's not the first thought. It's labor, it's buildings, it's software system. It's everything. But hey, let's reinvest in marketing. And that's why I loved having the return on investment kind of earlier than we planned on, because this makes my conversation with this a little bit easier. It's go ahead and talk to your leaders and say, hey, that's fine. My budget's staying the same. If we've got access at looking at that P&L, it's saying, hey, but if you gave me X amount more to begin with, you can hire X amount of more potentially into the future based on these statistics. And it radicalizes the change of thought, because there's nothing worse than speaking to a leader or owner that does not understand the marketing lead investment, what we call launch capital spend, before you talk about the people. If you talk about the people, you're more than likely going to have to sit there, and unless marketing pulls a rabbit out of their butts, they're going to be looking and saying, we don't need this person 12 months after we hire them. Go ahead and reinvest in a place that generates more business, so that those hires are not just needed, but required into the future. And bringing that train of thought to leadership is different. Now, Joe, to get back to your specific question on this standpoint, it's an interesting one, because we look at labor as a labor efficiency standpoint. All other expense standpoints, we look very simply at it should produce a 50% return in profit after that expense has been spent. So again, keep the numbers round, sweet, simple. If you spend $100,000 on marketing over what you did in the last 12 months, 12 months into the future, it should have produced $50,000 in profit ultimately. Meaning what? It should produce 150 in what we call contribution margin, gross profit, right? Left over after the production to pay for that 100,000 plus produce that return. And it's that piece of, if you can go to your leaders, again, I haven't looked through the panelists, but my guess is not very many people have heard that 50% return on investment on most spends that you put in your business. If you go back to your ownership and say, hey, I just heard this crazy guy talk about numbers, and he said we should be getting a 50% return, and I think I'm doing that for you, and they've not seen the data themselves to know that they're getting it, I promise they're willing to have a sit down and have more of a conversation. And so again, to me, I mean, it's my background, but I'm always willing to challenge. I'm always willing to say, no matter what I do, what if I did this? What if I do that? Hey, if you're not willing to do this right now, what do I have to do to get there?
Yeah.
And that's that piece of it. And so again, conversations, communication. I joked about recruiting when we started this on my introduction. It's all about communication. And I think in today's day and age, that's the biggest problem we've got in all business, no matter the butts or the departments, is we don't communicate with each other enough. And I think it all starts with marketing. Marketing is the communication platform for every business. And if we're not communicating the right way as marketers, what look do we have elsewhere on that standpoint?
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think there's a lot of change that marketing can, and my prediction is, and it's a bold one, but I think in the next couple of years, legal marketing specifically will have that power and those reins, because, a lot of managing partners I'm talking to, I hear them say, I wish my marketer, my marketing director, my CMO would come to me with more business questions, right? More financial questions. And I think that if the question is not asked, it's not answered, right? So this is definitely not meant to be put on entirely on the marketing team's shoulders, because some of you will be met with like, don't worry about it. That's not necessarily the right answer. But Roy, before, when you were talking, something that really dawned on me is that, and this is somewhat relevant when you're already in-house, but it's definitely relevant when you're potentially going to a new firm, asking the question, what is the firm's goal here? Is the firm's goal to have marketing support the existing attorneys and just support the business that we have? Or are we in growth mode? Are you in growth mode? Are you looking to add more attorneys? How many new attorneys do you want to add? What are you looking to invest in that growth? Because if the app, according to AmLaw, the AmLaw survey, the AmLaw 200 survey, I think it was like a little over $400,000 per attorney was about the billable revenue that came in, right? So if we're gonna want to add 15 attorneys or 20 attorneys, what does that look like? That's a lot of revenue. What are we investing to make that revenue? Because that's not going to just happen organically.
I need you on my shoulders when I interview. And this is going to seem very left of center, but it's me. I think part of that is exactly what everybody should be asking, because I think you set the stage at the front end. This person means business. I think our fear when we're interviewing for these roles to ask that question is that we won't get the job. That so many of us were English and theater majors, and we still carry that insecurity around with us. I didn't go to law school. I don't have I have an MBA. I got that later. And my husband, who's the smart one in the house, said, go get your MBA so people know what the hell you're about. But you go into those job interviews and you're just like, oh, I hope they like me. I hope I please them. And you're starting the game on the wrong foot.
Yeah.
And how do you ever get back from that to ask those tough questions? So I think that is, of all the advice we've given so far, that's the best of all. And for people who are in the thrall of budget and have their job now, like, what does that do for me? Well, there is never a bad time to start asking those questions and to say, I've been working on my continuing education. I sat in on this webinar. I'm part of Legal Marketing Association. These are questions as a professional I am encouraged to ask. So I am asking them.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid. They might get mad at you. They might, because they don't know how to answer your questions. And you're going to feel really uncomfortable. And you're going to go, oh, ooh, am I in trouble? So what?
Yeah.
You need to ask the questions. And our anonymous attendee, they did something that they deserve credit for on the individual budget thing. They clarified that they actually did what I suggested. They kind of went back and said, I can get your logos, I can get your ads. So they are now doing the tracking around that, which I think, again, you got to do that for a couple of years and then you start to see some trends. So if your firm isn't giving yourself the grace, you give yourself the grace to go, I might not have all the data I need in 1 year. I may need a couple years to start to map those trends.
And just to piggyback on what you said there, Roy, the true thing about the growth standpoint is we're going into a time period here fiscally that we've never seen before.
Mm-hmm.
There is no more production out there. There's just a people shortage. That's what we're coming into. So
Yep.
Guess what? Leaders are looking for people that are willing to grow on their own. And that's what I love everything you just said there, Roy. If you let your leaders know that you're out there on your own and you're self-growing and you're self-motivated, there is nothing better for leadership, because I have those conversations with folks right now.
Yeah.
With managing partners. It's
Yep.
the folks that are growing that you can trust, that are considered A players.
Yeah.
In that standpoint.
Yeah. So I also encourage anybody that's here that is really thinking that you might want to have these conversations. If you're not part of the Legal Marketing Association, you should be. And I hate to say the word should to anybody, but this is one that I say you should be, because it's very easy for you to have an off the record conversation with a number of your peers at peer-sized firms that can tell you what they're spending on marketing. And, you can baseline that against what you're spending and what your firm's spending and use hard proof and data. Because what we do know, if you look at a DISC, I don't know if anybody knows DISC profiles, but if you look at a DISC, most, lawyers are in the C/D category, right? So they want to know, they want facts and proof to back up why somebody is saying something. And if you can say, well, these 5 firms that are our size are spending this much money, and even better, what their potential ROI is, even giving them a ballpark, you're in a different conversation, right? So you can really make a stand, quite a nice stand in your firm. And I know we've spent a lot of time talking about this, and we'll move on to a couple other topics, but I think the core of this budgeting webinar is really to empower you to get the ROI information. Because if I look back at, we've probably spoken to 150 law firms this year that were looking to maybe do SEO or something like that. And I would say maybe 20% of them could actually tell me, yes, we do have a good track of our ROI. And that's jarring. And, that 20% is even high for what it's been over the last several years. And it's legal is one of the only industries that's true, that it's that low. You know, a lot of industries, you know, my cousin was a product marketer and they had all of their ROI down to a science, figuring out exactly where it came from. They could, with
Oh yeah.
95% certainty, they could tell you where everything came from. So
I used to feel so frustrated that I didn't have enough data in healthcare. What I wouldn't give for, we had market share. We could lead, we could, you know, by DRG, the you know, I can't remember now what the letters to diagnostic something anyway, but you know how we build. But I could track each individual when we had a health fair and it was around heart. I could see, you know, so there are other industries that just have the infrastructure you might not have available to you, but how you can replicate. And the other pointed thing I will say to anybody out there, yes, we're talking a lot about culture and existential issues, but that's really underpinning the challenges I think marketers face to have the budget conversation. And we know we've all received the shame-based feedback that somebody met someone at a cocktail party or at the bar who said, your marketing should be doing this. And rather than trust the person they're paying, some random stranger, they come and say, they said we should be doing this. Why aren't we? Well, again, you don't have to tell them I have Yoda in the background, but you can say the international president of the Legal Marketing Association said I should be, past president, I should be asking this. Jack, who works as a fractional CFO for all manner of law firms, said I should be doing this. Bring that in. You're learning from other people, and don't be afraid to bring that up the other direction and say, yeah, I talk to people too, and they say we should be doing more of this.
yeah, and look, in the worst case scenario down the line is that you can't make movement. Nobody's if this statement is untrue, it comes untrue. You got out of a really bad situation. If nobody is going to fire you for asking good questions, right? And if they're that threatened by the great questions that you're asking, yeah, you got to get out of there anyway, right? So you know, ask the questions. Worst case, you're met with no. And if you're met with enough no's and you're frustrated enough, maybe it's time to move. But we have a question here. And then, Roy, I'm going to ask a piggyback question to something somebody else asked. I have had attorneys argue that lead generation is all they care about and that that is the only ROI that matters. How do you combat that?
I don't think you do.
No, I don't think so either.
I mean, that is what we should be doing. The
Right.
problem is we might not have the tools and resources to do proper lead generation. So look at your mix, what you do have access to. So a lot of the smaller firms I've supported, all I have is social media and all I have is media relations. So you can do a survey of your clients. You can find out what are they reading, what are they using, what's useful. That's another way to gather information to find out. As you get a new client, you could do, if they, you know, again, permission, if this is of interest to them, you could say, well, then I need an opportunity to connect with the clients we've brought on to find out why they've joined. Because they might say, oh, we don't want you talking to the clients. Well, if ROI on lead generation is most important to you, and I don't have a good email marketing system, and I don't have, you know, the bells and whistles, what do I have access to? Well, I have access to the new clients who came on, and I can ask them, why have you joined us? What drove that decision? And you're going to get some ammunition that then you can use to say, yeah, that's how we can do lead generation in the environment we have creatively. That's my reaction to that. I think it is important. You know, they're not wrong.
The only thing on lead generation that I will say is everybody's lead generation has continued to do what it's always done in the past. The only thing with 2024 and it continue into 2025 is that lead generation has continued to happen really well, but the conversion into fiscal dollars is not happening. And so for that anonymous attendee that asked that question, now's your opportunity to get a little bit of a shift on that. Is I hear you loud and clear, attorney, managing partner. I'm all about lead generation too, but what I want to know is that turning into dollars for us? Because lead generation is great.
I can pull all kinds of names out of the work.
Yeah, if it doesn't turn, it's useless for us.
Yeah.
And so big stat for us is more sales standpoint, but every person I speak to is days to close. If you're not looking at days to close and just looking at lead generation in a pipeline, you're going to miss big time.
Another term that you're invoking is qualified lead. So, and that was my point, is find out why people are actually hiring you. And then if you're generating leads or at least generating revenue, it's connected to what people are choosing you for.
Yeah. And this is the last thing I'll say, Joe, before I know you want to move to a different topic, is look, let me just give you an overall market up to date, just so everybody knows, because as much as I know everybody's said and understands that marketing's kind of not the forefront of everything moving forward. The other side of this is we are in an economy that is not in the best shape that it's been in a long time. And we're having more and more conversations with managing partners and executives that are, how do we get profitable and do what we're doing with the same? And so here's the piece. If you guys get your budgets for next year and you create your budgets and it's not what you want it to be, or it's the same as last year, there's a reason of the economy is different, right? Which is one piece. The other piece on all of it is, now's your type of question to say, okay, great. Let me ask the further questions to get better information, to get better ROI, because you're tasking me to spend the same, but potentially produce better. I want to be more involved. And that's your open door.
Yeah.
Don't say, oh, they're just giving me the same. The reason they're giving you the same potentially is the market, right? And that's understandable from the top level down, but use that as a door opening to use everything that we've talked about into the future.
100%. Yeah. So definitely a lot there. I want to dovetail this into a question. Roy, the question was kind of asked before that I think you typed the answer, but I'd love to know if you could just kind of, or if I would like to ask if you could just go back through some of the marketing initiatives that you invest at Clark Hill. And I'd like to add the addition of what's the big thing in 2025 that you're not necessarily investing in that you are starting to plan for?
So we operate lean. Most firms do. We really do. And we punch well above our weight. We just, these surveys out there, we're ranked 18 in terms of employee engagement on our social media out of the AmLaw 200. So
Wow.
we're doing well there. We rank 106 or 107 in the AmLaw 100, but when it comes to social media engagement, we're 18, and I think good to be socialized is 56. So I put, what can I get on scale that can reach the broadest number of people possible and create tools they themselves can use to sell themselves? So I do focus on social media over and over and over. I focus on thought leadership. So we put a lot of money in a PR and media consultancy because those folks are generating substantive content. They're able to extend my reach with the attorneys, learn what they're doing, because the attorneys don't always want to tell you, but when they're going to be interviewed for a publication, suddenly they want to tell you. And we focus on search engine optimization and website development to make sure that our digital platform is robust. And any tools I look at, I make sure there's an educational component for my folks. I don't just want to hire someone that's going to do the work for them. I want my team to learn through the process how to write. Joe, you and Jacob, and I can't remember the woman's name. You had a wonderful panel at LMA. Thank you. LMA Southeast about writing content for SEO. And people going into that would have thought, oh, it's an SEO conversation. It's always going to be about ones and zeros. And no, it was about how you craft your content thoughtfully to make sure it shows up in search. So I'm all about creating as broad a digital footprint as I can, as big a tent as I can to bring as many people in. And that's where my budget is always going to go. Where we have a gap is in our email marketing at Clark Hill. And partly because I've done what I've done so well, they're not sure they need to invest in that. So we're going to have to revisit if the firm doesn't want to invest. And I guess I offer this too to everybody. We all feel that way. You might go, oh, he's the international LMA president and he's at a big firm and he gets to do anything he wants. I do not. I've been saying we need a CRM for 6 years. We do not have it. Might not be till 2026. So I now have to find other options to get to the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I'm not going to be able to measure pipeline anytime soon, but if I can at least get list management and email marketing straightened out, and that they realize, there's a factor out there, 50%, you get a 50% return on email marketing is far more effective in social media than those other things. So we're missing that in our mix, and we need to figure out some workarounds for the short-term HubSpot, whatever that we can do. So that's where my energy is going to go. I share that simply to say, whoever you are, wherever you are in your continuum of your career, there is going to be something you haven't gotten to yet. You haven't gotten the budget for it. You don't have the team for it. You're not ready for it. That's okay. You're boiling the water slowly around these organizations, teaching them new techniques and tricks. Lean into the things that you do well, make that part of your marketing mix. And again, demonstrate the return on what you are doing versus what they think you should be doing.
Yeah. And legal is traditionally 5+ years behind on trends, right? So understanding that that's kind of what you're contending with. If you can get the firm to agree to be 1 to 2 years behind trends, you are now 3 years ahead of your competition, right? Like it's a very tough thing to wrap your head around, but we know as an SEO firm, like the last couple of years, SEO has been finally being accepted as a great source of lead gen and visibility, where, other industries have been doing this for 10 years, right? So definitely very good note to have, right, about the CRM. You're not alone. There's so many people that we talk with that they can't get a CRM through. I think there's a fear factor around what it's going to tell or how long it's going to take, or, if, this person's sister is going to be put into the CRM because they emailed their work email at some point, and there are solutions to all of that. So I'm mindful of time here. Jack, I want to ask you two questions. So you used the 50% ROI metric before, but I know you and I have had other conversations about your beliefs around this, right? So if the marketers here are working with outside vendor partners to do SEO, social media, whatnot, what is a good or true ROI? If they're spending 100K a year, are we really looking at 50% ROI as a good metric? So if you're spending 100, you're getting, and making 150, that's good. Or should there be a higher expectation of the dollars that get deployed?
So it all depends on where you are and what type of business you're at, what level of business you're helping out on right now. And the reason I say that is, look, 50% return on investment is on a new experiment per se.
Yeah.
What we say for most managing partners, executives, is we have a pattern that is similarly put through. So I can't necessarily speak to all return on investments at different stages. A lot of it is Olympic records. What have you done in the past? How can we better beat that? How can we set new records? What do we need to do? How do we deem from the data that? But I can tell you guys, for everybody on this, is if you're not here, here's where you need to head to. You have a waterfall strategy for 99% of businesses that we see truly use marketing to the best unique value. The first bucket is branding. Spend all your money in branding and do everything that you need to do branding wise until you get to your max return on investment and you just can't produce anything more there. Once that bucket is full, that overflow goes into the second bucket. It's the smaller bucket that we call to action. That is done in time periods where maybe you have seasonality or something's not working. You pull out this metric and say, hey, come do business with us because of XYZ. If you saw people outside ringing the bells of TJ Maxx all year round, you're not going to get money year round. But in November and December, you're giving money, right? It's a call to action. The other standpoint is once that gets used, there's the third beautiful bucket called experimentation. That is the one that you now have a fully functioning marketing spend return on investment that you now get to go spend. The target in that experimental bucket is 50%. If you don't do the 50%, great, don't spend it. Your argument back to leadership is we need that money though, because we're going to go try and win on the next one. Again, you do two activities, one produces, one does not. Guess what? You're break even, and next year you're going to be better off for it. And so that's really what we see work best. So I can't answer your question about ROI on everything, Joe, but that's the best answer I could probably craft for you.
Well, we had a question in the chat about how do you measure ROI on email marketing, for example, and the person asked open rates, clicks, whatever. And I said all of the above. What I'm hearing Jack say as well is sometimes you need to format your own dashboard of return based on when I did one class of Six Sigma, there's leading and lagging indicators. No one ever wants to talk about that. The leading indicators are, did someone open it? Did they share it? Did they RSVP for the event? That's just, did they take an action on that? Then the lagging indicator, which everyone wants to jump to, do we get any money for it? Well, by the time I know whether or not I got any money for it, it's too late. But at least if I can say directionally, people are opening, they're taking action on this, they're showing up for our events, the pipeline is going to narrow. You're going to have a wider mouth where people are open the email. Narrow.
It's the funnel.
It's the funnel. They're going to, they're going to take action on it. They then eventually will go, I want to hire you, or they might not be in the right time to hire you, but now they have the awareness. So that ROI is going to be a multi-year factor as well.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's a whole nother topic. We do have a ROI topic that we're going to be talking about in a future month. But one thing I will say there is that the ROI that we tell, and I'll be very direct about this. The ROI we tell folks, if you're spending on SEO and paid search, like a 3 to 5x is a bare minimum that you should be willing to accept. Now, that's not day one, right? But after a year plus of investing in this, if you're not seeing at least that in return, that is not a worthwhile investment, right? Like there, especially, most industries, practices within legal, that is a real stat. That's a real number. We see that on a regular basis. And honestly, like our firm's not even really overly happy when that we see a three to 4x return. Like the understanding and asking these questions of your partners of like, really, what should we be happy with? Partners being external partners, right? If you're working with somebody doing email, like tell me about what the baseline is that you're seeing your clients doing and things like that. But then also positioning that conversation to your leadership is like, what does success look like, right? How many dollars should I be getting back for every dollar we spend for you to be like, hey, you did an amazing job this year. Marketing crushed it, right? Because now you're putting the investment band around marketing as they're understanding that you're trying to get a certain number of dollars back for every dollar spent. And once that's a really exciting thing where they're like, oh, wow, we got $5.50 back for every dollar we spent this year on marketing. What generated the most revenue, right? Can we put more money into that? What is that going to look like? And so it begins that transparency in that conversation. And if you can't answer that question because you don't have the transparency into it, you're now in the driver's seat. You now can actually start asking for access.
And just for the parallel, I brought up 50% return. Joe brought up the other side of that. The other way of looking at it is it's a 5 multiplier. No matter what numbers you give me, if I do a 50% return on marketing, it's usually going to be around just over $5 that you need in revenue on a dollar of marketing. So you're 100% correct, Joe.
Mm-hmm. And again, because we have a mix of folks on this call and from the questions, we get some people who will hear this and go, that sounds daunting. How am I ever going to get there in conversation? Well, this is what's worked. Focus on what you do well as a marketer. Invest your time and what money you have in that, and take every victory lap you can all year long to demonstrate whatever it is that you're able to measure that there's been a positive outcome, to earn your way into the larger conversation to say, okay, now can we talk about, you see the success here, even if it feels apocryphal. Now let's apply some dollars to this because it can be done. And there are people like Jack out there. That's the other thing. There are resources that you as marketers can lean into and bring into your organization in partnership with you to have the conversation, and you should avail yourself of that.
Yeah. Well, so I'm mindful of time. This went so fast. Thank you. October webinar registration link is in the chat. We also reached, for anybody that's in the AmLaw 200 or curious about it, we launched the AmLaw 200 website analysis report. So go take a look at that on our website, download it. We pretty much broke the entire AmLaw 200 down based off of all different SEO and website factors. Awesome stuff. Like we've gotten some really good feedback on that. There's also a webinar that we recorded that you can download that actually talks you through that from our experts. If there's anything that we can do to support you, I know the three of us are here, happy to chat, happy to get connected. Look out on Friday for the release of this webinar, as well as the summary. The summary will have the statistics that we pulled at the beginning of this call. So hopefully that's a little bit of an additional ammunition for you when you're having conversations with leadership. Happy budgeting season for those of you that are involved in that. May the odds be ever in your favor. And thank you all for spending the last hour with us. This has been great. And Roy and Jack, you guys are amazing as always.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having me. Loved every second of it.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
All right. See you, everyone.